Bonjour people, ¿cómo están? And today I'm finally building something again. Yay! So, with that being said, I'm going to show you guys how I built this RGB backlit Detroit Lion sign thing, light decor piece. And yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so I didn't record any of the actual digital stuff that I did to try and figure out how to build this. So quick explanation here, I slapped the Detroit Lions logo into Illustrator, I created an outline, I put stuff in the outline to give me an idea of what I was doing, and then we got to this point. Yeah, that was about it. So yeah, I moved on to transferring everything from paper from there. If you want a tutorial on how to do this, go look it up. It's pretty simple, just use MS Paint. And there go my words. With this, when I was putting it together, it's sort of just like a massive puzzle. The biggest thing is making sure you cut off the 1/8" margins that exist, because then you can't line anything up if you don't do that. So I went ahead here and I just sort of threw everything together. I took the time to tape it down and just messed around with it as much as I could to make sure everything fit and lined up neatly. Then from there, I moved on to trimming off any extra paper that I had before putting the template onto the piece of wood that I was using. This, I think it's 1/2" ply. It's either 1/2 or 1/4" ply, and I'll have everything in the description down below. And I just started cutting out the extra and making sure I could tape everything down so I could go through and do the things with the Sharpie. Trace the outline, that's what that's called. And then the tape wasn't working so well, as I can't put Sharpie through tape, and I can't keep something down with the tape being where I'm cutting. So I went ahead and used some super glue just to fix that mistake real quick. That also was sort of a mistake, and you'll see why here later on, and I'll explain why. But then it was just a process of very painstakingly going through, trying to get the super glue to not soak into the wood as deeply as it did, and cut the rest of the template out before moving on to sharpening it. Okay, so next up on the to-do list for getting this done is using Sharpie and getting the entire outline onto the piece of plywood. Now, if you're doing this, make sure you have ample time to do this, because this took me 2 hours between trying to put the template on here, cut it all out, trace the outer line, and then go ahead, cut the inner pieces, and then trace the inner lines, because, yeah. So here you can see what I mean with the super glue was sort of causing some problems, where it was very difficult to pull up the piece of paper with the super glue on them, and the wood just devoured the super glue, so it left large blotches, which you can see in the end, but they get hidden with the dark stain that I use, and it's a bit easier to see. Now, all this project is based around this, I believe it's 1/2" piece of plywood. Hopefully I correct myself in post, but all of the materials for this, including the plywood sheet and all of this, will be down in the description. Don't get this place. There goes my words. Don't get this piece of plywood. Be smart. Get an actual nice piece of plywood. This was a pain. This thing splintered. This thing shattered. And it was a mess. Now, this part for me was the most painful of all of the steps to get this light done. As you can see, I'm using a jigsaw. And for anyone trying to do this, if your jigsaw works properly and you have the right blade on it and you just go slow, everything will be perfectly fine. But I did none of those things. I sort of just went for it after never using a jigsaw before. I had a jigsaw that doesn't work very well, and I think I have a metal cutting blade on that jigsaw. Don't ask why, I just didn't care. It was cutting the wood, and yeah. So then this led me to this problem. If you have any overhang or any piece that isn't really close to the main portion of your design, if you're not doing this line's character, then you can break things, like this tail, where it just disappears and just went, I'm done. Like, as you can see here, the tail sort of just disappears, and when I looked down, that was a surprise. So with that, it's an easy fix to do. Just use super glue, and then we'll use Bondo on this later on, because this thing splintered like I stated before. And just get yourself the right tool, take your time, and get a good piece of wood. Yes, because that's a word. Get a good piece of wood, or else you're gonna have to do what I have to do here and super glue everything together, and then pull out some Bondo and mistakenly use it inside the house. Now, on another note with that, Don't use Bondo inside the house. As you can see me struggling here with the dry little tube thing. That was fine. Then I grabbed a wood filler. That was not fine. Things did not go well. I opened that can and instant regret. So use that inside the outside. Yes, my words don't want to work, but that's fine. Use Bondo when you're outside and everything will be fine and you won't be surrounded by possibly toxic fumes. And then this is just where I'm filling in a bunch of crevices that broke when I was using the jigsaw because again the jigsaw was terrible. And then with that it was just using Bondo to fill and patch any of these spots. You can do the same thing if you have problems, or you can just go buy a new piece of wood and try again. I didn't have that luxury so I didn't care. So it's just using Bondo and then filling it in. This took forever to dry, but besides that, it was fine. Okay, now that we're getting close to being done, we need to prep the wood to make sure it can actually take the stain, the feather finish stuff that we'll throw on there in a bit, and everything else that we do to it. So what I did was I took a sanding block, and I believe that was an 80 grit piece of sandpaper, and I just went down and sanded everything. I just went for it, again indoors. Don't ask me why. It's just what I did, and I really focused on those spots that had the super glue still there and that had paper stuck on them because those were important spots to focus on since the paper didn't want to go away. So then I just grabbed this little cloth thing that I used to use for cleaning up my chalk desk, which you can see up here in the corner if you want to go figure out how I built that. But I used this little cloth just to clean off any extra chalk. That cloth no longer exists because I sort of got rid of it along with the bucket. But anyways, I just used it to put water on the piece of plywood just so it would soak it up a bit so that I could go ahead and just go ham with my X-Acto knife, tiny screwdriver, and a hammer on this piece to give it some more rustic, some more beaten up texture, even though this thing was already very badly beaten up and covered in knots. And now the moment I've been waiting for is going after this piece of wood where I'm not putting the fender finish with sharp objects. Because, yeah, that's a fun thing to do. So, I went ahead, I grabbed my X-Acto knife, and I just started scoring lines down the middle. I did the same thing with my tiny screwdriver that was both flathead and Phillips, just to put some large gouges in there. And then I just slapped it with a hammer, and then scraped the surface with the screwdriver again. Because, why not? I was trying to get some good texture in there, and because the water was moist, because the wood was moist, it came up a lot easier, and once it dried, it wasn't as apparent as it is now, which is a good thing once you add on the stain. Okay, now we're just going to take a second look at some stuff I got on Amazon. Here I had some sea glass, but most importantly, these LED lights, which are the backlight for this entire project. I was going to use the sea glass, but then I didn't because it didn't fit, so don't worry about that. So with this, I just went ahead and started messing around with the LEDs, figuring out how they worked and getting all this done. Again, with everything else, this will also be in the description. But the nice thing with this was it was $13 and it's full color spectrum. The white is pretty good for a white. It's got a bit of a blue tint, a cooler tint, which I really don't care about since I'm using it for the blue. But besides that, it was overall a pretty good LED light. I really like the look of it. I like the transition of the lights. And it was $13, so I can't argue with that when the next closest one I could buy in person would be $30 from Home Depot. So yeah, these were a really great deal, and they worked great on the final product, as you'll see. So then moving on from there, back to woodworking. So I worked on setting up a fence for the piece of wood, 2x4. Wait, all of my words went everywhere there. I set up a fence for my 1x2 to go against, and then was able to use that to cut equal length pieces for the wood. Now, that didn't happen because if you look at how that fence is connected, it's got like 1/8 of an inch of the clamp connected to it, and with that being said, the wood grabbed the blade a few times, and that was really bad because it sort of just threw it off balance, and yeah, so that really didn't make any sense for me to do when I look back at it. As you'll see, I had to go back and cut a bunch of pieces anyways, so just figure out what works best for you. I just ended up using the actual 1 inch, which isn't actually 1 inch width of the piece of wood, to determine how far away my wood was from that back of the lion, and then just cut as thin or as thick as I needed to fill in the spaces. Now, if you look at the spacing on these as I'm now supergluing them down and the thickness of them, you'll see they're having some fun times, and there's a lot of different sizes. And when I went to go nail them, there was definitely a fun time because some of those split. So be careful you don't cut too thin pieces of wood, because then you're going to be in trouble. Also, make sure you have the right length nail, because if you don't, you're going to be in trouble when you turn this around and realize, oh hey, look at that. Half or all the nails are sticking out the other end, and I now need to go grab a pair of pliers to try and cut all of those out. Yay, fun time. So yeah, I had to do exactly that. It took me a second to go grab the pliers, so I just took you guys with me, and I just started raiding the bins to try and find something, and didn't, and struggled for a bit to figure out where exactly I could find something I could use, because we did have nail pullers and nail clippers, like the metal nail clipper things, but I couldn't find them, so long nose pliers with the cutting blade on them to the rescue, and that saved me because that made it a bit easier to use. But again, if you're building this, watch this entire video to make sure you don't have to deal with any of these problems, because you get the fortunate view of seeing how this thing was built to then go ahead and be like, cool, I'm not going to do half the things this random guy on the internet did, and I'm going to do this the right way. So yeah, then just go ahead and have some fun clipping all of those off. Then from there, it was a matter of working with the feather finish. If you haven't used this before like I did, I don't know what to tell you, just mix it to a consistency you're used to working with. I first mixed this with not enough water, so I got sort of like a really fast drying clay type consistency. It was not fun to work with. And then I also got trouble opening the bag, and then I just snipped it off. But with that, make sure you mix it enough. And honestly, the easiest way I found to do this was if you mix it to a bit past the slurry, where it's more of like a sauce, and then you use a paintbrush and go over it, over where you want the cover. I did this where you won't see here for when I did the second coat over the feather finish, and it just works so much better instead of their recommended like 1-to-1 ratio. So yeah, as you can see here when I'm mixing it, you see how that consistency looks for what they recommend, which would be a great consistency for putting it on the wall. But that's not what we're doing, so use this as you own see fit. Wow, words are still struggling. Use this as you see fit and as you like. And also, use your fingers. Try with a blade if you've got like a small paint knife, which is what I was using, but just use your fingers. It's so much easier. Or a paintbrush, like I said before. Either way, do whatever works, because honestly, I don't know. You're just watching me struggle with this basically for half this video. So yeah, let's move on to staining this. So for the stain on this, what I chose was to use I think it's a dark walnut stain, just a really dark stain to contrast what's going to be the really light aspects of the concrete. Now, this was the first layer, as you can see here. I only did 1 layer of stain, but I did do 2 layers of the feather finish, as I said. So with this, I went ahead and just covered everything with the stain. And the concrete was starting to look nice. I thought it was going to work out, but then it didn't dye evenly, which is why I went ahead and did a second coat with the feather finish. And honestly, if you do this without spilling onto the feather finish, you might only need 1 coat. But going over again with that like sauce type slurry of the feather finish with a brush just makes it come out really clean. And then maybe adding a second coat of stain wouldn't be too bad if you want it to be really dark, because at that point you have a really, really strong contrast against what's going to be a very light grayish colored cement in the end. Okay, so the last thing we gotta do is slap some lights on the back of this tiger, and this is not a tiger. We gotta slap some lights on the back of a lion, and we are good to go. So, with this little kit that I bought for this, there's 2 important things to note. First thing is that 3M tape that's on the back. It started to come off with the adhesive backing instead of sticking onto the LED strip itself. So make sure that you don't pull off the tape along with the backing and only pull off the backing, or else you're going to be in a bit of a pickle when the lights don't stick. The second thing is that second wire coming off the white controller box there is the IR or infrared receiver for the remote. If the remote cannot be in direct line of sight of that receiver, you aren't going to have a working light system unless the remote's up against the wall. So, with that being said, make sure it's somewhat visible. It's pretty easy to hide. It's got a black face on the entire thing. It's literally just a black casing, so if you can hide the white part, you're good to go. And then all you have to do is wrap the lights around this entire thing. That was the easy process here. It's just a matter of taking your time to slowly work the lights around and figuring out where's the best place to stick them so that they give off a very nice light glow, and making sure that you don't have any overlap and that no light sticks off to the side of any part of your design. Now, this is definitely something you can do with literally any other design that you create. It's just a matter of making sure you build it correctly and make the designs and templates like I did. And again, if you're looking to figure out how to do the digital part, don't come to me, go to the internet, because there's a ton of tutorials. I'll link one down below also that make it super simple to use. So yeah, with that being said, thank you guys for watching this video. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you enjoyed this project, I'll have all the details, all the materials that I use down below, including the images that I used to first reference this design. And yeah, if you like this, go ahead, like, subscribe, comment what you'd like to see next, because I'm always looking for new ideas on how to do. I have 4 other projects-ish that are in the works right now that will come out as videos, and some other fun stuff coming out soon, so stay tuned, and I will see you guys when the next video comes out, which should be next week, because I'm still trying to hit the 1 video a week for a year. I've only missed 4 weeks so far, so let's see where we go.